This is Art Television.
Coming up, State of Business, sponsored by...
Manage all your SLT Mobitel services through the MySLT app.
IWS Aviation.
Ultra-fast connectivity for businesses and homes. From the only network that can provide 100 to 1000 Mbps speeds. For over 1 million fiber connections. Buy online from sltmobitel.lk to get connected to SLT Mobitel Fiber, the fiber of the nation.
Hello there, you're watching our television. This is State of Business with me, Pumwitha Katagampala. Stay tuned as we bring you the most up-to-date highlights of the day. Now first, have a look at today's headlines. IMF urges Sri Lanka to restructure Chinese debt. Tourism sector expects a flow from extended state of emergency. And now news in detail. Now, a group of Sri Lanka Podujana Peramana MPs, including former ministers Dallas Alahaperuma, Professor Gil Pierce and Dr. Nalaka Godeheva, say that they would represent the general public in Parliament and not agendas of political parties. 11 SLPP MPs who supported MP Dallas Alahaperuma at the election of President last week held a joint media conference this morning and said that they would also not hesitate to sit with the opposition in Parliament if the need arises.
And it is my deep conviction that the declaration and the enforcement of a state of emergency in the conditions that prevail in our country today is fundamentally incompatible with the core values, the convictions and the beliefs that the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna holds to be sacred. There is absolutely no way of reconciling these. There is a basic inconsistency. And this is one of the main reasons why I had no option but to oppose the state of emergency. I would also draw attention to a very authoritative statement made by no less than 108 medical specialists in this country, professors of medicine, consultants with a worldwide reputation and stature, who have made the strongest possible condemnation of the onslaught that was launched against the protesters at Galle barely 24 hours after the new president took his votes. These medical personnel have made particular comments on the right to medical treatment, access to medical treatment. People suffering from serious head injuries, bleeding profusely, not having access to timely medical treatment. At this time, more than at any other time, our country needs the support, the goodwill, the understanding of the international community. We are all aware the governor of the central bank has not minced his words. He has explained to the country, as indeed it was his duty, to explain the dire straits in which we find ourselves economically.
223ක් කියන්නේ 100ට කීයද? 1.7ක් විතර. ජනතා විමුක්ති පෙරමුණට මහා සමාජයේ තිබෙන්නේ 1.7ක බලයක්ද? දැන් අපිට සමස්ත ප්‍රධාන විපක්ෂයේ නියෝජනය කළා අපි සියලු දෙනාටම ලැබුණ ඡන්ද 82ක්. ඒ කියන්නේ 137කට පොඩ්ඩක් වැඩි ගාණක්. ඒ සමාජ මතය 137ද? ඒ 137යි අර 1.7යි 139ක් කියලා කියන්නේ. ඒතර සමාජ මතය 139ද? ආණ්ඩුවට රනිල් වික්‍රමසිංහ මැතිතුමාට හෝ ආණ්ඩුවට පක්ෂව 61ක ජනවරමක් මහා සමාජය එළියේ තියෙනවද? කරුණාකරලා බලන්න. ඒක මේක විකෘතියක් කියලා අපි කියන්නේ. මේක විකෘතියක්.
අපි දැක්ක මැතිවරණ කාර්යාලයට ගිහිපිලා ඩිලම් පෙරේරා කිව්වා මේ අලුත් දේශපාලන ගමනක් යනවා කියලා කහපාටත් එක්ක කියලා. මේ ඒකේ ආරම්භයද මේ අද දවසේ
ඔබට උවමනා ආකාරයට පූර්ව නිගමන ගැනීමේ හැකියාව තියෙනවා. මම දැන් ඩිලාන් වෙනුවෙන් උත්තර දෙන්න යන්නේ නැහැ. නමුත් මේ මොහොතේ අපි එවැනි අවස්ථාවක් වෙනම පක්ෂයක් විදියට සංවිධානය වීමක් නම් අයි අපි ඒකට පැකිලෙන්නේ. ඒකට පැකිලෙන්නේ. අයි සංගම ගන්නෙ. අපිට මේ කිසිම අවස්ථාවක් නැහැ.
ජනාධිපතිවරයා තෝරාගැනීමේ තිබුණු පාර්ලිමේන්තුවේ ඡන්ද විමසීමේදී ඔබතුමාලා කිව්වා ඔබතුමාලාගේ පක්ෂයේ අය දුන්නේ UMP එකේ මන්ත්‍රීවරයාට දිනවන්න කියලා.
සමහරුන්.
ඔව් සමහරුන් නමුත් මේ හිටපු ජනාධිපතිතුමා කිව්වේ අපි දැන් මේ අපේ පක්ෂයෙන් ඩලස්ව දැම්ම නමුත් එයා ගිනිුවේ නැහැ නේ කියලා. මොකද ඔබතුමාගේ අදහස්?
මම එතුමාට නිදුක් නිරෝගී සුවය ප්‍රාර්ථනා කරනවා.
Meanwhile, the International Monetary Fund said Sri Lanka should begin debt restructuring talks with bilateral lender China. This was expressed by IMF's Asia and Pacific Department Director Krishna Srinivasan in an interview with Foreign News. The nation with a population of 22 million is currently engulfed by its most severe economic and political crisis in recent history. The government recently decided to restrict fuel imports for 12 months. The country owes Beijing $6.5 billion in financing, including development bank loans and a central bank swap, according to data from the Institute of International Finance. China, the world's second largest economy, has invested in projects such as highways, a port, an airport, and a coal power plant. Japan and India are also bilateral creditors to Sri Lanka. Asia and Pacific Department Director Krishna Srinivasan pointed out that technical talks on a new IMF program are ongoing with both officials from the Finance Ministry and the Central Bank. He also maintained that Sri Lanka has to engage with creditors on a debt workout to ensure debt sustainability is restored. Sri Lanka has requested an IMF rescue plan to overcome its worst economic crisis since independence in 1948. The country defaulted on a bond payment debt earlier this year on its $12 billion overseas debt with private creditors as it struggles to pay for imports of basic goods. An extended fund facility program from the IMF, the fund's 17th plan for the nation, requires countries to make structural economic reforms. The Maldives and Laos are other examples of countries in the region that are facing similar debt situations. Srinivasan said the fund is advising countries to spend more in alleviating the impact on the poor and vulnerable while keeping the budget neutral by reducing expenditure elsewhere or raising revenue. The IMF representative communicated that as corporate debt and household debt are also included in the significant debt issue, there are added implications for policy making. Now, the Treasury bill yields continue to ease for the second consecutive week this week. Bond investors and traders are digesting the relative calm in markets and rising hopes of a staff-level agreement with the International Monetary Fund. Yields fell by between 29 to 264 basis points across the 3 10-years, logging a much steeper decline than the 5 to 104 basis point decline logged in the previous week when the decline in yields began. Since taking office, President Ranil Wickremesinghe took measures to restore order, implement a system to distribute the limited stocks of fuel, and presented a revised budget with more policies to raise revenues and rationalize expenditure. These types of reforms win over bond investors, prompting them to reassess their risks and return profiles on their investments in government securities. However, inflation running at a near 60% level is a serious concern to investors to consumers alike, as real returns remain sharply negative. The auction held yesterday also saw the central bank raising the full amount of 85 billion rupees offered, skewing mostly towards the 3-month tenure. The public department offered 37.5 billion rupees in 3-month bills, but ended up accepting 60.4 billion rupees at a yield of 28.86%, which came down by 264 basis points from last week. The PDD raised 10.2 billion rupees from 6-month bills after offering 25.0 billion rupees at 29.24%, which came down by 73 basis points. The benchmark 1-year bill yield was the least to come down by 29 basis points to 29.53%, at which rate the PDD raised 14.4 billion rupees after offering 22.5 billion rupees. The central bank kept the 6-month and 1-year bills open till 3:30 p.m. to accept up to further 25% from the aggregate amount offered at the auction from willing investors who could not participate in the auction. Stay tuned for more stories after this short commercial break.
low latency. Data ball one, data ball one. Take it anywhere with SLT Go. Data ball one, data ball one.
A non-stop journey with Data Ball One from SLT Mobitel Home Broadband.
Hey Siri.
Uh-huh.
Can our smartphones spy on us?
Interesting question.
Exactly. Which is why we're going to look for answers here on Shift.
Welcome back to the program. Now, the Colombo stock market saw renewed interest in plantation stocks, propelling them to dominate the top 10 gainers list yesterday. 7 of the top gainers were plantation stocks. The food, beverage and tobacco sector saw 19.7 million shares change hands via 4,339 trades, generating a 573 million rupee turnover, whilst deals on Sunshine Holdings accounted for 421.6 million rupees of turnover. Plantation stocks figured prominently as well. Malwata topped the list of gainers with 20% and its voting share gained by 17%. Other top gainers included Udapusellava, Bogavantalava, Hapugastanna, Madulsima and Muskelia. Analysts attributed the renewed investor focus on plantation stocks to re-rating of prospects, with tea fetching higher prices in recent months, as well as they have been relatively undervalued. Forbes and Volcker tea brokers said in June the FOB value of 1,779.63 rupees per kilo was the highest ever, surpassing the previous best of 1,705.14 rupees recorded in May 2022. Meanwhile, Sri Lanka's regional plantation companies added the support to national efforts aimed at enhancing food security with the launch of a new campaign to boost cultivation on RPZ lands. They will also provide crucial assistance to their employees in mitigating the impact of increasing food prices. In total, the 24 private sector-owned RPCs in the country have collectively either engaged in direct cultivation or provided assistance for the cultivation of short-term crops used for everyday consumption. These crops are produced for the consumption of over 1 million RPC employees and residents living in RPC estates and also in surrounding villages. With the support of state authorities, RPCs have allocated lands and have provided inputs like seed material and plant nutrients at their own expense. Through the partnership, a total of 1,000 model gardens will be set up around child development centres, in addition to a further 20,000 home gardens that will be developed within RPC estates. And now, the decision to extend the state of emergency for a month by Parliament yesterday will stifle the tourism industry. There are fears that this action could prompt more countries to impose travel bans on Sri Lanka and further reduce forex earnings. The Hotels Association Sri Lanka maintains that both the declaration of a state of emergency and its extension send a negative message to the world. The association's president expects arrivals to drop further as the state of emergency makes it difficult to promote or sell Sri Lanka as a destination. Earnings from the tourism trade fell to a third of what it brought in prior to the economic crisis, deepening the shortage of foreign exchange. Central bank data shows that Sri Lanka received just $59.1 million through the tourism sector in June. This reflects a slight gain from $54.3 million earned in May, but less than a third of the $191.5 million generated in March, when the country's economy started to unravel. Tourism is Sri Lanka's second largest services inflow in its balance of payment after worker remittances. The tourism sector has, however, been successfully battered. The 2019 Easter attack, the pandemic from 2020 and the economic crisis in 2022, which precipitated political instability and social unrest. In 2018, Sri Lanka earned $4.8 billion of tourism and gained another $7 billion annually through remittances. These together accounted for the roughly $10 billion deficit in the trade account. The tourism sector was off to a great start in January, generating $268.3 million in earnings, a post-pandemic high. However, arrivals, which reached a post-pandemic peak of 106,500 in March, fell by a third in June following travel advisories amid the popular pricing. However, provisional data available through July 17 points to improved arrivals, with the first 3 weeks bringing in over 25,000 visitors. Sri Lanka has earned a cumulative $739.8 million through tourism of 411,377 visitors in the first 6 months of 2022. Meanwhile, the growing demand for public transport has prompted Transport, Highways and Mass Media Minister Bandula Gunawardena to seek foreign funds to electrify the Kalani Valley Railway line. At a recent cabinet decision media briefing, the minister revealed that the government plans to approach multilateral donor agencies to secure funding. A feasibility study and detailed engineering design have been completed for electrification of the Maradana Paduka section of the railway line. The Kalani Valley Railway line was inaugurated from Colombo to Avisavella in 1902 and to Openaika in 1919. However, its services were cut down to Avisavella as a dedicated passenger service in 1974. Minister Gunawardena noted that initiatives are underway to increase the frequency of trains on the line within the year. Meanwhile, he stressed that it is unfair to pass losses incurred by Sri Lanka's railways onto all taxpayers. According to him, Sri Lanka Railways incurs 40 billion rupees per annum in losses, while revenue is not sufficient to cover wages of railway employees. Meanwhile, commencing a new chapter in Sri Lankan private-public partnership history, one of the largest seafood exporters, Test Group, has come forward to reopen the abandoned Olive Fisheries Harbour in a joint venture with the Minister of Fisheries. This will help reopen fisheries activities to people and help recommence businesses stalled for nearly 4 years due to the closure of the harbour. Credit for reopening the harbour should go to Chairman of the Ministers' Secretaries Union, Kirtisri Veerasinghe, and Minister of Fisheries, Douglas Devananda, who promoted the project. Test Group Chairman Sharon Fernandez said that one of the major issues at the harbour was the clearing of sand dunes, which were limiting vessel access. Fernando added that the company is investing 15 million rupees to clear the sand and reopen the harbour. The company also plans to operate the as yet unused fish processing plant. Test Group was one of the contractors in the 16 billion rupee Danish Olive Harbour project, and Test has now come forward to help reopen this harbour. The harbour, when in operation, supported over 25,000 livelihoods and around 200 fishing vessels. Stay tuned for stock updates.
This is the MySLT app. Wow, get extra GB. Check data usage. Activate data bundles. Pay bills. Report faults. Change a duck into a swan. I'm sorry, can't do that.
Download today. SLT Mobitel, the connection.
Welcome back to the program. Trading at Colombo Stock Exchange ended on positive notes today. The All-Share Price Index gained 52.95 points to close at 7,679.64, and the S&P/SL 20 gained 20.76 points to close at 2,429.88. The turnover was 1.0 billion rupees and over 56 million shares were traded. Coming up next are Forex rates. Well, that's all our news today. See you tomorrow with State of Business at the usual time. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.
State of Business was sponsored by...
Manage all your SLT Mobitel services through the MySLT app.
IWS Aviation.